Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week's theme of the community's favorite tracks of 2022. Today, we're checking out a band called Dopapod. We're going to be looking at the track Black Holes from their upcoming album called Dopapod. Although it's not upcoming. I was just reading the description on the video. It was upcoming at the time, but it did release in May of last year. So let's dive into this and see what Dopapod is bringing to the table with Black Holes. Yeah, very fast 4/4. Super funky. Very trippy. I love this polymeter thing going on. Yeah! Wow, what is this? Yeah, all the rhythmic playfulness is so good. What? Yeah, playing with textures and rhythms on that. Yeah, so this is another verse, but I think the vocal melody is different. Definitely an interesting element on the vocals, if nothing else. Yeah, leaning into that dotted. What? Yes. Yes. Oh, very nice. Man, that's what I needed. Wrap up this week. Everything about that was so good. Sorry. So it's comprised of like three distinct modes. And I kind of want to look at all three of them because they work well together, but they also explore very different ideas. And they end up feeling very distinct, even if what I think is the production is keeping them all a bit more cohesive than the composition is. We have our verse, which is funky polyrhythms. There is a lot of offbeat accents. There is a lot of contrasting accents between instruments. There's a lot of emphasis on dotted accents as well as on the beat accents, and then we have different rhythms between different instruments. So it's not even just the accented parts of the beat, but also just the general flow of the rhythm as well. It is all over the place. And the first time I listened to it, I was just tossed aside musically. Is like, you don't understand this. Get out of the way. We've got places to be. Um, but the second time we hit it, and like I said, I think we landed on a verse in our final section as well. But the vocal melody was different. But the bass and piano, keyboard, and drums were definitely doing what they did in the other verses. And I think the vocal melody shifted for our second verse too. So maybe that's just something that they do in this track, maybe in all of their work, is to bring back the verse, but with different melodies on top of it. Anyways, the bass has this really funky um, series of accents. I want to call it slapping, but when I actually saw the bassist, he was just finger picking on him. So it's a heavier type of picking that comes off, and it's do 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 do, and it has just like almost weighted because it feels like it's just a series of eighth notes. Do 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 do. But there's this. It feels like every other note just wants to be held on to a little bit longer than the ones that precede it. Um, and then this transitions from the series of eighth notes into a series of dotted quarter notes. And what a dot means is that you're going to add an additional half length of the note. So assuming we're in 4/4, there's 4 beats, and the other 4 means that the quarter note gets the beat. So every time you see a quarter note, it takes up one whole beat. So the dot implies that you should have 1.5 beats for each time you see this symbol, this dotted quarter, because it's 1 and an extra half. And what that amounts to is 3/8 notes. An eighth note is half of a beat in this time signature. So you can already see we're working with groupings of 3. It's not triplets. Triplet is putting 3 into 1 beat. This is just 3/8 notes. And so it's also going to push hard when we have several of these dotted quarter notes back to back against the framing of our bar, because our bar is 4 beats or 8 half beats, and we are consistently utilizing groupings of 9 half beats. So it pushes over where the next downbeat is actually on the and of one. So it's just after we enter the next bars when we're actually going to emphasize half of a beat into the next bar. And it creates this super syncopated concept. It will eventually line back up after 8 bars. I don't think they give it that much, though. I think they artificially put a new rhythm in at the end of it so that it lines back up. But yeah, that's the bass line. Do 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 do, and you can feel how much space is between all of these because we've just went through do 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 like four eighth notes that give us the pulse, right? If all of those are half beats, then we just went through 2 beats. We know what these 2 beats should feel like, and then we begin to play a bunch of notes with a rising pattern that aren't on the beats we just identified as the heartbeat of the song. Um, and that's the first point of rhythmic complexity. The drummer's off doing their own thing. This is literally just the bass. The vocals bounce around with what they're doing. I think in the first verse, I can't remember, like I said, I think they have different melodies in every verse, but they are primarily working on a static rhythm. It might have been dotted, it might not have been. I remember it was different than what the drums were doing, but I can't remember exactly what it was. But it's static. There's like no rhythmic changes. If they pick a length and they just every syllable is that length. And it creates sort of this background heartbeat that isn't the 4/4 that's presented to us. Um, and so we end up having like 3 different rhythmic pulses to this, one of which changes. Like I said, our bass starts emphasizing the downbeats and then shifts to emphasizing every beat and a half. Um, and it's just a really chaotic moment filled with these funky grooves. And it's so good. It really is. It brings a lot of joy to me to hear this. It is very palatable. You can get right into the groove, but there's a lot of hidden complexity behind that. And it's just so masterfully towing that line between depth and accessibility. I love it. There's also the notion that kind of gives it a psychedelic edge, which is the vocal work. Every single vocal line in here is dual vocals, and I don't know what's going on with them. I wish I had better hearing for pitch because they're consonant, but they feel different. That's terrible. Um, they're not creating dissonance with the 2 notes they're singing, but I feel like the 2 notes they're singing are just slightly off from each other. There's something weird about the interval. It feels close, but it feels distant. I have no idea what interval they're using for that. But it makes it feel kind of trippy to me, especially when they're not lining up with the rest of the music rhythmically. And even within themselves, they have a very odd harmony between their 2 voices. This takes us into the chorus, which the verse kind of leads directly into it. It's a very smooth transition once we get in. The funkiness is dropped off. Our guitar stops playing its rhythmic pattern and shifts to country, southern rock, bluegrass. Maybe it's a little slow for bluegrass, but it's just a lot. It sounds to me like finger picking. You could probably do this with a pick, but you'd be playing fairly quick. It seems a lot easier for me just to pocket the pick somehow and shift over to finger picking. And it's just a lot of movement that emphasizes chordal structures. The drums kind of take a little bit of a backseat on the rhythmic stuff and lean into more metronomic stuff. The bass leans into a very nice bass line that helps accentuate the chords that the guitarist is doing, and our vocals move away from their highly arrhythmic accentuated line to something with a bit more melodic flow to it, with a shifting rhythmic structure, if I remember correctly. They didn't just pick one length and repeatedly play it. Like, massive shift here, right? We went from proggy funk to country, and yet it doesn't really feel like we moved a lot. I'm still wrapping my head around this one. I think the synthesizer is a connective glue between the two. I think there's a lot of production work that goes into this to helping them sound similar when so much of the composition has been upended to do the opposite. But while they're very distinct sections, I don't feel like they're drastically different. And it's really phenomenal that they somehow achieved that. Now we do this again, verse, chorus. The verse is a little bit different, as I mentioned, with the melody. And then we go to our bridge. And we focus in on the synthesizer with extensive use of a mod wheel, and I'm going to assume automation of some sort of facet of this sound. I don't know what facet it is. Maybe it's compression, maybe it's range or sound or width. I don't know. There's a lot of little knobs when you get around to playing with samples, and they can all be automated. The end result, though, is this synthesizer sound that sounds like it is constantly being made smaller and then expanded to get a fuller sound, but simultaneously it's also widening out and narrowing down. And then we're also doing these modular pitch shifts so that we're not just going from, for example, C to C sharp for a half step interval. We're gradually moving between the two notes so that we can hear all the microtones between them. And so we have this gradual modulation of certain sonic aspects of this instrument, plus we're having modular changes to the pitch as well. And it's just this very uh, morphing sound. It never feels solid. The note itself doesn't ever feel like it changes. Not in the 13 notes that we have in our Western scales. Um, it's just amorphous, just always moving in one direction or another, and it leads into a beautiful electro synth solo, which what this whole section takes on a techno edge to it, and it's kind of been in the background of the previous two sections, but no part of this song would I really think, oh, this is also part electronic. It's certainly a component, just not a strong one. And here we ditch the funk, we ditch the rhythmic structures that are kind of chaotic, we ditch the groovy country stuff, and we're like, okay, we're fully on this granularly modular sound of our synthesizer. We are in the future distinctly. We're working with electronic sounds. Um, and we have these really nice synth solos that kind of come out of nowhere, but again, somehow fit into the general vibe and sound of the song so far. It's just, I don't understand how all of this fits together so well when it's so many disparate pieces. And from here, we cycle back to another verse with a different melody on it and our chorus, and we wrap the song up with a neat little outro. And it's just bizarrely fun. I think that's my big word here is I really enjoyed myself. This was a fun listen. It's chaotic in places, but for the most part, highly accessible across the board, while exploring a variety of different sounds and soundscapes that all feel connective from moment to moment. And I can't imagine how they came to this point, but this was phenomenal. I have no idea what the song's about. Maybe it's because I was just enjoying myself too much. Maybe it's because I understood it in sections. You know, funk to country, electro back to funk to country. And maybe if I had a better understanding of how they all work together, maybe I could have a stronger narrative or understanding of what the music's trying to tell me. But at the end of this first reaction, it just feels like a fun track to listen to. Maybe that'll change when we hit some lyrics, which I'll do in a second. Maybe it won't. With that said, the second's up. Let me go check out some lyrics. So, most of this goes over my head. There's some science fiction adjacent concepts, plus, it seems some sort of general space knowledge is necessary to understand some of this. Our first verse, which is actually part of what I thought was the entirety of the first verse, was actually half an intro and then half of a verse. I didn't make that distinction musically, but that's how it's listed here. The verse says, neurons linking, eyes are blinking, mind imprinting, thoughts keep thinking, theoretically, gravitation, explanation, parable, acceleration, hypothetically. This whole verse goes right over my head. I'm not even going to lie with that one. The chorus, though, leans into something a bit more fantastical and metaphorical that I get. All for one and one for all, you'll never fly until you learn to fall into black holes. Which is, I think, the best thing I can take away from that is that in order to achieve greatness, in order to learn to fly, we need to learn to take chances with the unknown. As they put it, we need to learn to fall into black holes. We don't know what happens in a black hole. We have guesses, and we do know that they are sort of gravitational pits, and we presume you'll be crushed by the gravitational weight, but we don't know what's on the other side. No one's ever survived a black hole and come back out of it to let us know what there is. So I think that's what they're going for. The idea of flying into a black hole is kind of dumb from a scientific perspective, but from a metaphor, I think it really works. You know, you need to be able to go where no one's gone before if you want to do great things that no one's done before. And in order to do some of this, it requires a group effort, all for one and one for all. We need each other to help us achieve the greatness in life. I like that. But then we go to the next verse and we dive into, once again, stuff that's right above my understanding. Expanding awareness universally, entering the field of relativity, inevitable fate horizontally, incomprehensible singularity. The first line, expanding awareness universally, I kind of can get into. It's like some sort of group think meditation thing, right? But the other three right over my head. But we get to the bridge, and I think that this is where things start to make a little more sense as it's spoken a bit more uh, typically. There's common language here. Sometimes you have to look outside to understand the thoughts within. Sometimes the things we say and do are souvenirs of where we've been. And if you're lost, you can find solace in the memories of your mind. Look for the simplest solution in the fortune teller's eye. And I really like this. It tells us that Um, the best way for us to understand ourselves are to expand our own horizons. That even when we look within, we can find memories and thoughts of who we are. It's about both reconciling with the self and the group, finding an identity while also having strong social circles that will help support us to achieve that greatness that we're looking for. This is a phenomenal message here, and I'm so glad we got something positive in this best of 2022 week. And it speaks to communal experiences and communal growth without losing one's identity. It's so good. I don't know how it correlates to the music. It might just be one of those situations where they write some tasty grooves and they get a really nice message in a neat metaphorical sciencey wrapper, and they're like, just mash them together. And I'm fine with it in this case. The music is a jam. The lyrics I can get behind. I don't care that they don't work well together. Not everything needs to be like that. I do enjoy when it is. But, some of my favorite music from my, favorites of 2022 video that I posted up over the weekends, that way. The link is right there if you're interested in that. Um, I'm not going to say that everything there is thematically cohesive either. There are certainly some albums that are thematically cohesive, but I think my top three albums, even though they're not really top three, the ones I listen to the most though, not a lot of cohesion in them. They're just good songs with catchy lyrics in them. So, um, yeah. Anyways, those are my thoughts. Dopapods, black holes. What did you think? Did you enjoy it? Anything in here that stood out to you? Anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on or just leave your own thoughts? Put that stuff down in the comment section. Above that, there's a description box with a link to Linktree. It takes you to this guy right here. It's got links for everything related to the channel. You can find my music. You can find a link to the Discord community server. You can find a link to ways to support the channel, and so much more. There's a lot of stuff in there. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could like, subscribe, and ring the bell, I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, we have a special selection coming up, and then I decided to check out something very cool. Periphery dropped some tracks recently off of their next album, and well, it's been killing me not to listen to them, but I've been saving them for a reaction. I'm not going to do both of them because they're both like 8 minutes apiece. I'm probably going to pick one of them. I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll see what I feel like after I record the next one. What kind of energy I have. Maybe I will do a double. I don't know. It's Periphery, right? They're worth it. Until next time, though, remember to be critical, not cynical, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.